Should we get started? Good. I'm standing between you and lunch, so we'll get going. Welcome everyone. My name is Hallie Applebaum. I work at the World Bank, and I work with entrepreneurs and government agencies to study innovation ecosystems in urban environments. So over the past day, we've seen how sensors and drones and data and platforms can help connect and monitor and quantify our world and create smarter and safer cities. So on this panel, we're going to turn to the people who are using this technology, who are tinkering with these platforms and working on top of this infrastructure. And so the panelists today are exploring how this infrastructure can create opportunity for a participatory culture, for education, employment, creative manufacturing. So I'll give each panelist 5 minutes to present their work. We'll have some discussion, and then we'll open it up to you for some Q&A, because we're keen to hear your thoughts as well. So first, we have Julia Lopez Ventura, and she's been the coordinator of Smart City Strategies in the Barcelona City Council since October 2012. We have Saori Imaizumi, and she's been researching and designing programs on the maker movement in the education sector, especially in the context of STEAM education, which is science, technology, engineering, art, math, and how that influences innovation ecosystems. We have DK Osesari, and he's the co-founder of Low Design Office, an architecture studio that's based in the US and Ghana. He's a Fulbright Scholar, a TED Global Fellow. He teaches at HSCI University. And then Drew is the founder and CEO of Future Everything and a fellow at the University of Dundee. So since we're here in Barcelona, let's start with Julia. Let's see.
Can you hear me well? No? Now? Yeah. So actually, since I have 5 minutes, I would like to start with a video to show one of the projects that we are most proud of and to warm a little bit the discussion afterwards. This is a video made by kids that were wearing GoPros in their helmets in the Hack Lab Day that we celebrated in May this year.
Li posaríem un cap al cap de l'home amb uns cables que transferia el que té el cervell humà a l'ordinador. La nau espacial tindrà un botó que es tira, estàs a punt de xocar contra un meteorit i llavors, doncs el cliques, llavors la nau pateix uns canvis. I quan jo sigui gran, construiré un robot perquè em faci el menjar, faci la rentadora, cuidi els meus nens, de tot. Pues fer com vies per totes les carreteres, fer com vies d'escalèstrics, saps? I ficar per poder girar, perquè si no et deixaria girar perquè hi hauria molta pressió i ficar els cotxes normals, però que tinguessin a part de rodes, que tinguessin a la via aquella. Ui, jo inventaré un ocell com que sigui de veritat, però que en veritat sigui una càmera i una nansa, on aquella nansa talla el cable elèctric, vale? Llavors, quan deixes anar la nansa, llavors pot passar l'electricitat, que va parar en un fil ferro. El fil ferro va circular l'electricitat fins que queda un camp magnètic. Ja. No, sí, hi havia moltes coses, i això és el seu primer any, eh? Ja, per això, que cada any, segurament, més i més i més, i coses cada cop.
So, yeah, this is the Hack Day that we were celebrating with kids here in Barcelona in May this year. The kids were speaking in Catalan, but I think that you could understand the common language of creativity and kids using their imagination. No? So this leads me to one topic that I would like to talk about, which is what we want to achieve, which is, I think that we will all agree that we want to achieve a common, empowered, connected society. No? What do we win with this? It's just a society that it's savvy and mm, it's save it with technology, which is also safe and careful with technology, which uses technology for social good, which controls technology and not otherwise. This is extremely important. And finally, a society that it's innovative and creative with technology. No? This project that we see over here, it's a project that we call Ateneus de Fabricació. Yesterday, when we started CitiSense in ESADE, my colleague Tomás Díez from Fab Lab Barcelona introduced the concept of Fab City. Fab City is a common effort that we do between private and public sector to create ateneums of fabrication and fab labs all together here in Barcelona. So spaces for creativity and innovation for our citizens. The good thing about this Hack Lab Day that we had in Barcelona is that in one day, one Saturday morning, we had around 1,000 families with their kids, their parents, but also their grandparents, innovating with technology and learning about the possibilities of what they can do with technology if they have the skills to do it. No? And so this is what we want to achieve in the future. And how do we want to achieve it? I would summarize it in just one sentence. We have to be radically open. And with radically open, I mean that we have to open everything, open our city, but all the aspects of our city. We have to open our society. We have to open technology also. I'm an engineer, so I have no doubt about opening data, opening technology, opening infrastructures. We have some projects that I would like to mention during the discussions about this, but we also have to open new education trends, like offering these non-regulated training to our citizens, like our kids, our citizens of the future. And we also have to open minds in our administration and understanding that citizens are not mere users anymore of our services, and we have to start opening the creation of services for them, this concept of co-creation. And I think that I have my 5 minutes expired, no? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Saori. I have been working on a makers and education space, and I wanted to start by saying that technologies might have like a huge potential for changing the way we teach and we learn. So I want to show you my experience through these slides. So I started my international development career in education. So I went to India and Pakistan so many times. And this is a picture from Pakistan vocational training education. They are using old sewing machine, and then girls are looking at it, but they're not looking happy. And this is also another vocational training school designing the fabrics. And this is for empowering women, but the design seems to be very traditional, not unique. And here, this is a programming or computer education, again in Pakistan, vocational schools. But what they're teaching, it's not new. It's all curriculum is outdated. So because of this, employment rate for these training is only 10 to 15%. And I was wondering, okay, if you're teaching the same thing, you should teach something different to really increase this employment rate. And the girls are actually really eager to learn. They told me that, oh, my father is like bringing me from home to the technology center to really learn computer skills to get the job. But it's really hard to get a job for them. And then the skills they're learning is outdated. And then I went to Chile for another project. And then I went to this vocational training center with different technologies, such as 3D printer, and a place that you can learn collaboratively in an open space. And then I was wondering, okay, we have to change the way we teach and we learn. So I also went to this makerspace. This is an informal and innovation space, which has different technologies and place for everyone to come and learn together and be very creative. So it's such a different from what you saw in Pakistan Vocational Training Center. And so I'm thinking about how this technology can potentially revolutionize the way we teach and learn, and then potentially create jobs through using this makers movement. So first, what can technology do? So technologies can connect electronics education with arts and music. So Hallie was mentioning that the STEM education, like science, technology, engineering, math education, it's really important for innovation for the countries to be competitive. But not many girls and youth are going to the STEM career. But this technology, little bits, for example, it's this electronics bits, which can connect different kind of bits, which has lighting and music. So even kids can learn to do electronics, but it's more in a fun way. So this STEM education is becoming STEAM, which is A means like art and design. And also, these little bits allow everyone to share what they created through these technologies. So teachers and students can learn from each other and sharing their projects. And then one of the big issues of teachers is like they are in a silo. They are really suffering from like not having enough support community. But this kind of platform encourages teachers to share, and then they can feel that they're connected. And also they can improve their teaching lessons, and the quality of education goes up. And also this is the example for the city of Yokohama. And Japan, that's where I'm from, is suffering from the aging population, and then they feel not connected. And also the younger generation who are suffering from not connected, and then the mother who is trying to raise kids is suffering from not having any support. So Yokohama City opened up different kind of data, and then one of the data is about where the nursery school is, where the hospitals are. So someone created this web portal and then also smartphone application to connect mothers and then also elder generation who can advise on how to raise kids. So this is like an event portal, like where you can go for a workshop to learn how to raise kids or any advice from elderly. So then elderlies also feel connected, and the younger mothers also feel connected, so everyone benefit. And this is another example of Yokohama, and they have this local goods portal where everyone who is in a community can start their own project and then put it into this portal to raise funds. And so, for example, some of the issues which is raised here is about aging population, and also this for disabilities people, and then this is youth and the social infrastructure. So, for example, for this project for aging, there's a knitting community of older people. So by creating this community, again, the Asian population feel more connected. So this is another example, and then since the younger generation knows how to use technologies, they can create a community and then connect with the older generation and put the products and projects into this portal so that more people can learn about this to have more effect of connecting each other. So this is another fab lab that I visited. This is a digital fabrication lab in Japan. So traditional culture, like preserving traditional culture is really hard because the people who knew about the techniques are becoming old again. And this fab lab is created based on the Japanese traditional architecture form, which is made of wood and then not using any nails. And this is an old like sake brewery. And then using this technique, you can actually digitize all the pieces of the wooden pieces like this to make the file, digital file for making house. And then these techniques were shared by this another Japanese guy who went to Bohol, Philippines, and created the Fab Lab, and then used these technologies and downloaded the digital file to create the house without using nails, just putting these wooden pieces together. And then this was used for people who needed the shelter and houses after the earthquake and then tsunami happened. Everybody lost their houses, so this was used. So to summarize, the technology really helped in learning and motivating people and recognizing their projects and what they are teaching and learning by providing some internet platform. And then also secondly, it's like solving social problems through education using the Yokohama platform, for example. So then finally, you can also create jobs by using what you created through all this sharing community. Thank you.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, technical difficulties.
So I take it I'm next. So I think while we're trying to get the slides, I will overview. Essentially, I want to just briefly share a project we're working on in Ghana, West Africa, called Agbogbloshie Makerspace Platform, which essentially is a mobile, modular, scalable toolkit or small-scale infrastructure for open source making in electronic landscapes and developing world environments. Is it possible to go to like full screen or slideshow so I can use the clicker? Okay, cool. Yeah, so essentially we're working in this site, which is Agbogbloshie, the largest e-waste or electronic waste dump in Ghana, one of the largest in Africa, and in 2013 listed as the most toxic site on the planet, ahead of Chernobyl. This is a site where essentially these young guys are burning old wires from electronics so they can recover the copper. It's highly polluting. You can see the ground is also black from the buildup of heavy metals. And in the corner in the back, you can see one of the larger slums in Accra, which has maybe about, depending on who you ask, 50,000, 80,000 people living in just a few acres, next to a river right in front of the sea. But sort of in the context of this kind of aggressive, almost post-apocalyptic context, what we found very powerful and profound is that people are actually processing electronic material. So these are all like old plugs where you plug a device into the wall, and one by one they disassemble them and remove the aluminum tips of the plugs so they can be melted and made into new products. The plastic is separated, et cetera. So working with this environment, we are essentially trying to make a makerspace in a box or a makerspace in a shipping container, but because we're trying to really live the maker's ethos, we're literally building the container from scratch. This is sort of one of the modules, and here's the first two installed in the site. We call it a spacecraft because essentially we're trying to help upgrade and direct some of the processing that's happening in this ecosystem beyond just sort of recycling, but actually being able to add value and use digital fabrication to start producing building blocks for replicating this infrastructure and literally remaking and rebuilding the city. Also trying to understand the sort of broad range of materials that are embedded in every single device, for example, a refrigerator, and understanding and sort of documenting that information in a way that essentially the youth who are working in this industry can have access to it, not only so they can sort of protect themselves, but equally so they can find more opportunities for entrepreneurship. The long-term goal for this is actually moving into the world of computer vision and actually trying to build a sort of digital infrastructure which is able to monitor everything which is happening within this recycling ecosystem, and literally by being able to identify the objects, even ultimately the specifications of which specific device is being dismantled or is entering into Agbogbloshie, being able to map in real time all of the materials so that you know at any point in time how much copper, gold, silver, HDPE, whatever the material it is, by sort of being able to deconstruct digitally the components inside of a device. Thus far, we've also been mapping the whole site, so taking photographs and understanding all the different activities that are happening within the environment, partly as a kind of archaeology of the present, so we can understand the buildup of layers of accretion and materials, but also understanding that it's a much more complex environment than just a dump site. And you can't probably see it, but on the sort of side, some of these labels from this map, which right now has maybe thousands of points, but there's functional mosques within this site. There are spaces where people are actually making new products. There's sales and repair. There's places where they sort of scan all of your old hard drives and look for credit card numbers. So there's a really dynamic community of activities happening there, and understanding what's happening there ultimately allows us to create a digital platform that can amplify all of those activities and ultimately create a sort of digital infrastructure that is one part social network, but equally another part sort of digital manual, how-to, tutorial, audio and video database that allows people to learn more about safety, about electronics, and ultimately become a platform as well for exchanging sort of files on how to actually sort of fabricate things, but also being able to sort of buy and sell materials and resell products that you've developed in the makerspace.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Drew Hemmant. I'm founder and chief executive of an independent non-profit innovation agency in Manchester called Future Everything, and an academic at University of Dundee. And we're very concerned with putting the citizen at the centre of innovation and the smart city. And we do that through supporting the innovation ecosystem in Manchester. We're also very involved. Our background, going back 20 years, was in digital arts, communities of developers who are very concerned with this question. In my very brief talk, I'm going to give you a brief history of the idea of the Internet of everyone. And I think this idea will have different meaning in different regions and different countries. But we might trace the early manifestation of it back to the very early thinking around a digital culture. And this was in the sort of late 60s, early 70s. A lot of it centered around California, sort of led into the emergence of Silicon Valley. And sort of at the core of that was this idea, this belief in the emancipatory potential of technology. And there were ideas such as that by giving people access to tools, we can empower people. And that idea has stayed with us. It's kind of very much part of the DNA of digital culture. But it's not been smooth sailing. If you look at the early days of the internet, it was an open medium. People were creating, building that space as they went, but it was a small number of people. When the internet first really became a mass medium, it was static, advertising-based web pages, and then we moved to the social web, and now smart cities, Internet of Things. And the challenge there is that many, many more people are connected and able to interact, but that interaction is quite shallow. It's often consuming information or communication. It's not producing rich information. Very few people are able to do that. And the very infrastructure of the internet is quite hierarchical, and the business models and the industries around the internet have developed in a way that are quite top-down. And we've seen that play out in debates around the smart cities in the last few years, and calls for smart citizens rather than smart cities. And we've heard from some illustrations of other ways of working, more bottom-up ways of working around makerspaces. And I mentioned yesterday a project that's emerged from Barcelona, which is a bottom-up, citizen-led data platform and hardware platform for environmental monitoring. I can say a lot more about this, but short introduction. So I'll just end with maybe a question for discussion. And that is, how do we scale these up? And just to be really concrete, Smart Citizen, it's probably got a claim to be one of, if not the largest bottom-up citizen sensing platforms. It's still low thousands of people, and in practical terms, there's 3 main cities, and the scale of the projects has ranged from 15 to 100, and we want to go to 1,000. And these types of projects, and I'm not singling out Smart Citizen because it's a fantastic project, but some of these bottom-up open source projects can empower an already empowered group of people. So I guess my question is, how can we spread the benefits and go beyond that?
Yeah, would anyone like to start off with answering that?
Thank you. Well, actually, I think that's the question, and then I will launch another one for you. I think that this concept of co-creation, that I think that at some point should be more detailed. If not, we will have the risk of having a void concept like sometimes smart cities is or big data is. This concept of co-creation, I don't know if you have had the opportunity of this morning attending the speech of Anne Medler that was doing the introduction to both the City Innovation Summit and CitiSense. She mentioned two concepts that for me are key. One is small is beautiful. She said that referring to the need, which is a need of bringing on board all this ecosystem of startups and entrepreneurs that we have in cities. And here in Barcelona, we have a fantastic ecosystem of this kind. And I'm afraid that still there's a long way to do to really bring them on board on this process of co-creating together with them. And the other concept that she mentioned, and I really liked the approach, was regarding also the need of bringing the small on board, said, okay, but please do not do it following the Hollywood model. So for me, I don't know what she had in mind, but for me, what it's really needed in here is that we have to, from the administration point of view, we have to be a little bit more humble and recognize that our role should be as facilitators. And I had a discussion with Tomás Díaz, who is one of the thinkers behind Smart Citizen, about how could we help them make this push that Drew was mentioning, no? And I think that we have to work together. We have the focus now on the things that we do in Barcelona. And he has this fantastic civic project, if we can call it civic project. I think we can call it civic project. We have to do it together and facilitate. For me, that's the key.
So I worked more in developing countries, and then what I've seen is that there are some communities which understands the internet of everyone and this internet community, but majority of them don't. So key is probably to identify these champions, like who understand these concepts, and then encourage them, connect them, and then they become a spreader for this concept to the local communities which are spreading around. So this way, each local community will learn from these champions in a local context. And then these champions should be also connected to the global community so that they keep on getting good ideas and lessons learned.
Well, I can. I totally agree with those points, and I also think. I mean, for me, what I particularly liked about these intros was that I think what's super critical when you talk about all of these ecosystems making fab innovation, creativity, is that it has to be led with passion. That I think that, I mean, in a way, people may get training so they can be more employable in order to get a job or whatever, but like to really be creative, the only legitimate and viable driver for that is that you have to be excited about it. It has to make you happy. There has to be an energy that sort of stimulates your mind and unlocks that creativity. So I think that has to really be the heart of it. And I really loved, obviously, like the images of children just playing, is that the difference between that as a space for learning is night and day compared to like an extra classes program you have to go to on a Saturday to go and do like math problems, right? Like kids would not be enthusiastic about going back there the next time, except for like certain kids. And I also love these images of like these women in front of these sewing machines, like not enthusiastic, right? It's like the not impressed meme. So I think that's, to me, very, very compelling. And even in terms of the work that we're doing, is that these young guys that are in this environment are there working really to stay alive and to feed their families and to literally support entire villages in the north of Ghana. So for them to sort of leave what they're doing to come and do something, they're not going to do it just because it's good to do or because it will protect their health. I mean, they're already beyond that by working in that environment, and really what they need is money. So the ultimate draw for us is if it's fun, like if it's actually fun and something totally bizarre and wacky compared to their everyday normal reality, that's a primary draw. So I think the thing I would say in terms of scaling is that, just to almost be devil's advocate, I'm not even sure if we have to focus on scaling per se, but I like the idea of focusing on impact. Like how effective and how dynamic are each one of these instantiations of a project or of a particular model, only because sometimes I see, particularly in development worlds, that because there's so much of an emphasis on scaling, because somebody somewhere has to deliver on scaling, they end up scaling the first thing that has been completed or the things that they know about, and they're starting to sort of monitor something on sort of how easily it can be scaled, as opposed to how dramatic or powerful or inspiring is the impact on the ground.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. I think we'll have achieved something when we stop talking about the technology itself, like it's the end of the road. And part of the solution is good design. It's bringing technologies to real problems that people face. It's these kind of collaborations between private and public. But at the same time, we can't ignore the infrastructure. If we want an internet for everyone, the infrastructure of the internet is creaking, and someone has to pay. I think economics also holds part of the key here. At the moment, there's huge centralization with a lot of value going to a very small number of people. And if there were mechanisms for micropayments to be received by individuals when their data might be traded, that provides an economic thread to support this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. I have one more question, and then I'd like to open it up to you guys. Would really like to hear your thoughts. And that's that the maker movement, Internet of Things, is newer to a lot of people. What are some of your favorite resources? Where do you go to get your news on this? What types of books have you been reading that really resonate with what we've been talking about? Any words of wisdom?
Well, maybe I'll go first because I haven't really necessarily been reading the books or the texts, which maybe I should be doing. But I guess for us, being on the ground in West Africa, the internet is our friend. So we like to go to places like Hackaday or Instructables. These are websites where people share information about how to make things. There's also a website, GitHub, which has basically tons and tons of code that you can access. Another one which is really relevant in terms of the work that we're doing is something called ifixit.com, which is basically like a repository of information about how to fix your devices. So, your screen on your iPhone breaks and you're like, oh, well, that's it. I don't know, what do I do? But you can actually fix it. But even though these companies make it as difficult as possible for you to fix it yourself, you can. So it's a really cool community of people that are sharing that information. And I think also that this is one sliver of the makerspace, but there's also communities of people. Of course, now I'm blanking. Forgive me. It'll come back to me later. But they're organizing almost like meetups where people will bring their old electronics or stuff that you have, and you can sort of almost like swarm at a place and then meet with other people that actually know how to do it. And so it's not necessarily a permanent maker infrastructure, but that sort of people can come together and even bring some tools and share knowledge and expertise in order for you to sort of have that experience, which is something that I think are increasingly also trying to try as well in Ghana.
Mm-hmm. One comment on that. I spent the last week here in Barcelona visiting co-working spaces and maker spaces. In one space we visited, there were maybe 30 people all assembling 3D printers. And someone commented to me that it would perhaps be cheaper for them to go into the store, buy the printer, and take it home, but that they're in fact paying, so that it ends up being more, to know how their printer is built so that if anything goes wrong, they can fix it. So you commented on something yesterday saying that people don't just want to own things, they want to know how to like recreate them.
Some of the books that I read is The Makers by Chris Anderson and Maker Manifesto, which I am planning to read. And then there are other websites on education-wise, like Maker Education and Fab Kids, and also Stanford has a Fab Education. So you can look at all these things to look at what kind of training curriculums and programs are there. And also in Washington, D.C., where I'm living right now, has the library, public library, which creates different courses to learn how to use 3D printers and etc. So these places are free. And then if this kind of place exists in your city, for example, this is one way to easily learn about these new technologies, and then you can ask different questions. And the library is also collaborating with the schools to provide this kind of curriculum which school has difficulty in creating as the technology is changing very quickly.
To also add on that, Sori and I, we both live in DC, and we were recently at an event on 3D printing for development. And one thing that the person from the library commented on is that there's so much demand for the space that they're expanding. He said the number of printers they have and the number of students that pass through, and it was really very impressive. So I need to go check it out.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think that all this makers movement became mainstream when The Economist decided to dedicate a whole issue to the third industrial revolution. That's it.
Great. Well, thank you guys very much. I'd like to open it up. Are there any questions that you guys would like to ask? Don't be shy.
Well, yes. So this is not exactly a question, but it's a comment about the scaling the solutions for smart cities. I think maker movements are all good, and they're all doing a great job. But at the end of the day, you have to look at sustainability. Any solution that is not sustainable, you're going to eventually disappear. And that's where I think kind of like lack of investment is doing right now. And a lot of people say, let's come with great ideas, great technologies, or it's just let's connect people. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, whatever solution that comes out of it has to be tested in the market. And it's going to I'm probably 99% we're going to disappear anyway. So the point is, I think we should put more effort and investment in testing it out, really, in real world, and sort out what works, when what doesn't work. That's my comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going to answer, but I just wanted to say bye, because I had another appointment, so it's been a pleasure, and you will see me these days running from one point to the other of the expo, in case you would like to comment anything. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I would like to strongly agree with one part of that, but add a point on another part. I think sustainability is really important. I think that's a critical issue. And I certainly believe in testing things out. And actually, I think it's part of the culture here that there's a go out and do and try part, really part of the DNA. So this is making by doing. So that's that kind of prototyping methodology is kind of built into the culture. But I would say that, yes, investment is critical, but we have to also consider value beyond GDP. There's a huge amount of value. I mean, there was one example about knowledge, understanding how something works so I can fix it, but also the value of being part of that community, of sharing knowledge, how that can create new economic opportunity. That has huge value. We had a discussion yesterday about how hard it is to measure that value, but it's very, very real. And so many people do come, they give. There's an anecdote that one person gave me that they spend a third of their time being productive, producing product. They spend a third of their time creating open tools that enable them to create those products. And then they spend a third of their time supporting other people to use those tools to create products for themselves. And that equation works because it's reciprocal and it's collective and it's a part of a collaborative community and culture. And that's a really key driver here, that there's different practices here that do stand up economically, but a lot of the value is beyond GDP.
Yeah, I also interviewed with many Fab Lab owners and then different tech shops that I visited to understand the sustainability operational model of these labs. And one model which is working is that you set up in a university so that at least, for example, for the tech shop, which is the kind of a fancy version of all this Fab Lab, and then it's in Arizona State University. So it's the city of that university is in Arizona, and university created a tech shop together with a co-investment, and then making sure that the university will have enough users, which is students, so that the tech shop will have enough membership covered. So that once those are agreed, then tech shop was created. It's going to be sustainable for now. But for developing countries, it's most of the time like they are using the public money for first starting up. So for example, this Bohol Fab Lab, the Japanese international agency called JICA put money for first initial investment, and from there now they're trying to figure out how to operationalize, but it's in the university at least, so the operation will continue as a part of the university at least. But for making it real business, it needs to have probably consultancy services within the Fab Lab, and then also allow more industries to come. So for example, in Arizona State University, they're inviting the corporates to come to use the space for their ice-breaking event among employees, or if the corporate entrepreneur wants to test their ideas, and if they want this space to test the idea, they can come and use. So these knowledge that they created can be going back to the corporate to have more innovation within the companies. So creating this kind of win-win relationship among different stakeholders will create some of the sustainable business operation model as well.
Great. Well, I want to say thanks to the panelists. This is, I think, the beginning of a really interesting discussion. And if any of what they said piqued your interest, I encourage you to approach them afterwards. Have a great afternoon.